Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So, we said during the time of the Prophet, he was the main mufassir, exegist, explainer of the Quran. He was the source. He was the source. So people go to him. And his job was to deliver and explain, not just to deliver, to explain. What is the meaning of this verse? But of course, not all people had access to him. The Prophet died. He died at the age of 63. After his era, we come to the second era, which is the era of whom? The era of? No. Companion Sahaba. That's the era after the departure of the Prophet. And here we said there were at least 10 famous people who explained the Quran. And we studied 4 of them. Do you remember the name of the 4? Who were the 4? Number 1, who was number 1? Ibn Abbas. This is number 1. Number 2, Ibn Mas'ud. And number 3, Ubay ibn Ka'ab. Ubay ibn. No, Abu Musa, he was part of the 10, but we didn't study him. We studied someone else.
Actually, we said the first one was Imam Ali.
Where was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud?
When?
Kufa. Who was in Medina?
Ubay was in Medina.
Ubay was in Medina. And who was the 4th one? Hmm? Who was the first one? Who was the first one, not the 4th? We have to put him first. Imam Ali. Those are the ones not only who were experts, but they were also reliable. Mizuki. God says in our book, the Quran, chapter 13, the story of Joseph. There was a prophet called Joseph. Joseph. God speaks about if someone wants to do something, let's say take over a ministry, a department, a school, an office, he has to have 2 qualities. Number 1, expert. He has to be expert. He knows his job. Because if he doesn't know, he's going to fail. What is number 2? Ameen, honesty. Honesty is also part of the qualification. Sometimes he's an expert, but he's a thief. Is he going to do a good job? He's an expert, but he takes bribes from people. He's not going to do a good job. So he has to be an expert in this field, knowledgeable, he knows what he's doing, plus he has self-control, Ameen. Exactly. Some of those who knew the Quran, but unfortunately, they did not have that level of piety and self-control. One of them is Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. One of them, unfortunately, was Ibn Zubayr, Abdullah, the cousin to the Prophet. Or Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, the Prophet's cousin. The Prophet's cousin, first cousin, Zubayr.
Is he the same Zubair in that battle?
Yes, he was killed in battle. He's the first cousin of Imam Ali and the Prophet, imagine. And he was very good in the beginning. In the beginning, he was with the Prophet, defending the Prophet, even defending Imam Ali the day the Prophet died. When they attacked the house of Imam Zubayr was there. But then later on, he became loose. Sometimes people in the beginning, they have good self-control, and then they started dwindling. They're getting weaker. Until he took arm against the legitimate caliph, Imam Ali, and he was killed. And he is buried outside Basra in a town today called Zubair. The town is called Zubair, just outside Basra.
Battle of Jamal?
Yes, Camel, yes.
How is he related to Imam Ali? Say like
The Prophet had an aunt, so he's the son of that aunt. So this aunt is the aunt of the Prophet and the aunt of Imam Ali. So he's their first cousin.
Is it Ammi? Ammi?
Yeah, Amma. Yeah. The son of the Amma of the Prophet. The son of the Prophet's auntie. He was the son of the Prophet's auntie. And our Imams, they tell us the reason why he diverted, unfortunately. He became corrupted. He was good until his son Abdullah. Imam al-Sadiq says, كان الزبير منا أهل البيت. This man Zubayr was on our path, loyal to us. He was a good man. حتى نشأ ولده Abdullah. The day his son Abdullah, he became mature and he started interfering in his God's life and influencing his his father's life and influencing his father in a bad way. So the father listened to the son. So he was killed. And you know, the day he was killed, though he took off arm against Imam Ali, and he was killed in the Battle of Camel. Imam Ali, when he came, he was crying. He took his sword and he said, سيف طالما كشف الكرب عن وجه رسول الله. This sword, you know the value of this sword? This sword frequently defended the Prophet in the battlefields in early Islam. This man, Badr, Uhud, and now look at his ending, how bad. And Imam Ali cried for him. And of course the others who could know the tafsir, the khulafa, three caliphs before Imam Ali. Who are they? Who came after the Prophet? Who was the caliph who came after the Prophet? You don't know his name? You forgot?
Maybe
Abu Bakr,
I heard, yeah.
the second Umar, the third Uthman. They are like this guy. They could have knowledge, yeah, but unfortunately no self-control.
Say, what about Talha? He was
Talha the same.
Was he related to?
Yes. No, Talha ibn Ubaidillah, he was not related. Yeah, but he was a friend of this guy.
Yeah, they were together.
Talha and Zubair were, they were buddies together. And both of them were killed in the Battle of Camel, both of them. So that was the first generation. What do we call the first generation after the Prophet? Yeah, let him look at his, yeah. What do we call them?
Last one?
Yeah, first generation after that. Don't go too far. We took it last Monday. We took it 2 days ago. Companion. And in Arabic, Sahaba. Sahaba. Good, Mizuki. You are smart. You are smart. What do we call the second generation? Who came after? Now, companions, Mizuki, companions are those who saw the Prophet. Physically, they saw him. Okay? The second generation did not see the Prophet, but they saw the first generation. But they did not see the Prophet. Or they were born during the time of the Prophet, but they were 3 years old, 4 years old. They didn't see him. They were in homes. Let's say they didn't take them to the mosque to see the Prophet. So what we call the second generation?
Tabi'in.
Exactly, tabi'in. Tabi'in. What does tabi'in mean? Keep looking at your followers, exactly, followers. For the exam, I'm going to send you the questions to Japan. And you answer them, you send them back.
Okay.
So, we come to the second generation. Tabi'in. And of course, tabi'in, the number of the exegist, the explainer of the Quran. Look at me, Suzuki. Mizuki, sorry, Mizuki. That was by error, not on purpose. The number of those second generation who knew about how to explain the Quran was greater than the number of the first generation. Why? Although the first generation, they saw the Prophet. They saw him, they talked to him, they were with him in the mosque, in the community, but was smaller than this. Those, they did not see the Prophet. They depended on their knowledge on those group because they didn't see the Prophet, but their number was greater. Why?
Because each one had a school, and from that school you have more students. You have more
Exactly.
students.
Just expansion in general.
They were spread out.
Because the first generation, they took this book for granted because the Prophet is here, so whenever I need to ask, I go and ask him, what is this? It's like, let's say some children, they take their parents for granted. He doesn't work, he doesn't study because his father is rich. So if I need money, I'll go, Daddy, give me money. Whereas someone else, his father is not rich, or his father is dead, he's an orphan. So he knows he has to generate the money himself. He has to go and study and work because I don't have a father to support me. Okay? So the first generation, they did not find any reason to go and study and research and go deep because there is the Prophet is here. Anytime I need, I go and ask him. While this one, they did not have access to the Prophet. So they have to study to discover. They have to study more and more so they would discover. They have to do more research because there is no Prophet there, so I can, every time I miss something, I go and ask him. I make it easy for me. In this case, they have to study. They have to depend on themselves. This is why, Mizuki, the second generation not only was greater in number, but it was deeper in depth too. In the depth of the understanding this book, deeper also. So quality-wise and quantity-wise. Qualitatively, they were deeper, and quantitatively, they were bigger and more in number. One more reason. What was that reason? If you can pay attention. That we have this, they are greater in number than those. There is one more element.
So you said you had to research more
Yeah.
because they didn't have the Prophet.
Yeah.
You said there was a bigger number.
You had to depend on yourself. Because see, Ali, now, if someone, his house is next to the scholar's house, and he wants to know something about fiqh, Islamic law. Because he sees the scholar, so easy for him either to call him, to text him, or to see him. I'll see him in the morning, I'll see him in the afternoon. So he doesn't go and research. He depends on the scholar. But if the scholar is not there and you don't have his number, here you force yourself to go and research yourself. You have to study. Okay? You have to depend on yourself because there is no scholar next door. You tap into him every time you need to ask something. But there is one more element also which makes this group, the second generation, bigger than this one. Those who explain the Quran, their number is bigger than this.
And you said expansion of this.
See, let me give you. The famous ones among those were 10 people. But the famous ones among those were 50 people. So why? He just said something.
He had expansion. Then
Exactly. Because now the population is also bigger. The population is bigger. Okay? When you open a school for the first time in a place, maybe the students are 50 students. After 20 years, those 50 are going to be 500 because people are going to get married. This village is going to turn into a town. It's going to turn into a city, you know. So definitely this is natural element. The growth and the expansion. Expansion eastward was because Islam was in Mecca, geographically. But then after that it went to China. It came close to you, to Japan. All the way to China, to India, to Syria, to Europe, to Turkey, to Italy, to France, and then to Morocco, to Africa. So Islam started to grow slowly. Definitely the people who are interested in knowing the Quran is going to grow. Can you remember from what I said earlier, what was the methodology of one of those, which is this one? Let's take him as an example. Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas. What was his methodology? Just say one of them in explaining the Quran. His strategy, his policy, his methodology.
He used the Quran to explain the Quran.
Exactly. He discovered something that if I don't know this chapter or the meaning of this verse, then if I keep searching, I will find it somewhere else in the same book. And this is the beauty of this book, Quran, which is not found elsewhere in other books. So if there is a mystery here mentioned in this page, this mystery is going to be unfolded maybe 10 pages, 20 pages, 50 pages down the road. If you keep studying and searching, you will find the answer. And we have many examples. I've given them many examples. Okay? So Ibn Abbas, he depended in his tafsir, in explaining the Quran, on this, that I use the same book to explain the book. Okay? Now, before we go into those people, I will choose maybe 3 or 4 of those, the second generation. As we did, we chose 4 from the first generation. We're going to choose 4 because they are 50. I'm not going to go into 50. You are not going to even to remember their names. So let's focus on few of them, better than, forgetting all of them. So I'm going to speak about a few of them. But before we go into few of them, what are the main highlights or the characteristics of this second generation? How it is different from the first generation in the way they explain the Quran. Only in the way they explain. I'm not speaking about everything. In the way they approached the Quran, they understood the Quran, and they explained the Quran. how they are different from the first generation, from the Sahaba, companions generation. What are the main highlights in their methodology? In another way, we say Madrasatul Tabi'een. This is a school of Tabi'een, okay? What are the main characteristics? How do you describe the school of Tabi'een? Is it really same exactly like their teachers, which is the first generation, or they differed from them? Somehow they differed. There are some differences. There are some distinctions.
Is it like balagha or taqlid or
Is it interpretation?
Hmm?
Science of like
You know, I am condensing this class, believe me, 70 pages into 30, 40 minutes. 70 pages, believe me. If I want to go into details, next Monday I'm not going to see any one of you. You're going to flee the town, not just the class. But I'm simplifying it and making it very condensed, very, very condensed. Because there are lots of names and parables and the other reason, because your first language is not Arabic. It's very difficult to translate, very difficult. Unless you know, because this book, it's a miracle in several ways. One of them scientific ways. There are scientific theories that are mentioned here that now science is discovering them now. And this book was revealed 1400 years ago. The other miracle is the language of the book. The language of the book, special language. It has special effect. So unless you really study the Arabic, which many people they did, many non-Arabs, Japanese, I know Japanese people. If you go Google, you see many of them, they are experts in this book. Chinese, Indians, Africans, Americans. We have this new, the study Quran. Have you seen it? Before you go back to Japan, if you are interested in learning the Quran, get a copy from Amazon. Because it's not in Japanese, it's in English. It's called the Study Quran. The Study Quran, this is the best translation. Do you know that some of those translators are Americans and Europeans? They're not Arabs, but they studied the Arabic literature, Arabic language. Okay, so what are the main highlights?
So the first generation, they pretty much, you said, what we said earlier was they focused on what the Prophet said and commentaries
Exactly.
and the riwayat.
The first generation, they just wanted to know the immediate meaning, but not an in-depth. Just the immediate, the surface meaning. Not all of them, huh? Imam Ali was not like that. Ibn Abbas was not like that. Okay? Even Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. But mostly the Muslims. The first generation, for them is to know the surface meaning. They didn't have time to go deep into that book. Besides, my friends, there is a psychological point here. The psychological point is that when a book is published, whether the Quran or any book, people of that era, they don't value the book like those who come 100 years later. They don't value. So many Muslims, when this book was revealed to the Prophet, they were very easy. They took it very easy. Yes, they loved it, but not like the way now we love this book. Same thing with the Prophet Muhammad. He was among them, but they come and they greet him and they go. But now if Prophet Muhammad comes, I will I will arrest him. I will keep him in my room. I would not, I will hold him. I will embrace him and hold him. I would not even let him leave my house. Or wherever he goes, I follow him. But at that time, it was ordinary. And this is something, it happens with all nations, not just the Muslims. At every era, with every person. In America, let's say, George Washington, now they revere him and respect him, and they speak about his legacy more than the time that he was existed. Same thing with Abraham Lincoln. Same thing with Thomas Paine. Same thing with all those leaders. People tend to value the person more after his or her departure, but not while he's there. Same thing with Imam Ali alayhi salam. Only few knew Imam Ali. Very few. Very few. Handful. The rest of people did not even evaluate him. They did not realize his value. They did not even acknowledge him. They didn't. Now people know who Imam Ali was. This is a psychological point. And it happens every time. It happens with many leaders, political leaders, philosophers, scientists, religious leaders, spiritual leaders. It happens. During their time, they were ordinary people. They go, they come. He walks in the market by himself. Now people put their pictures, they respect them, they love them, after their departure. This is a norm. This is a norm. Therefore, the second generation, they got to know this, the value of this, even more than the first generation. First generation was normal for them. Second generation, no, this is something special. Because now we know it has been so many years, 100 years after the revelation of this book, and we find this book still fresh, new discoveries. But the first generation, they didn't pay attention to this. They took it for granted. They took it for granted. And the same thing with the followers of Jesus. The same thing with the followers of Buddha. The same thing with the followers of Moses. When they are with them, they just treat them normally. But second, third, fourth, the more you go longer, the more people appreciate the meaning of those leaders and their books and their revelations. So, let's go back to the question. What are the main distinctions of the second generation's tafsir? What are the main highlights? How it was different from the first generation? In what things?
Were they trying to maybe answer the questions to new things that arose? Things that they didn't have to deal with from before?
Yes. So the first point is expansion. Expansion and extension. Expansion in the depth of the book. The first generation, they just wanted to know whether this verse came for what reason. Why this verse is there. That's it. So once they know this is to make this lawful, to make that unlawful, to tell them to do this, to tell them to do that, that's it. They leave. They don't go deeper. Whereas the second generation, this book for them was not only for lawfuls and unlawfuls. It has many other more dimensions. It had spiritual dimensions. Spiritual, not just physical. Not just lawful and unlawful. Spiritual. The Quran has spiritual value. The second, it had what? Philosophical dimension. Meaning that this book is also a book of philosophy. When it comes to the existence of God. What is God? Who's God? So the second generation, they started digging deeper to know more about God. And then they developed a science called what? The science of Tawheed. Tawheed. The science of Tawheed. Tawheed means monotheism. Science of monotheism. Of monotheism. Tawheed. Okay? In the school of Sahaba, the first generation, only Imam Ali spoke about Tawheed. In Nahj al-Balagha, if you go, check his book, he speaks in details. But others, they didn't. They just wanted to worship God. They don't have time to speak about monotheism and dimensions, Tawheed al-Dhat, Tawheed al-Sifat, Tawheed al-Af'al. These are dimensions of God's monotheism. Many dimensions. One of them, the unity of the essence of God. Second, the unity of His attributes. Third, the unity of the worshipping of God. Fourth, the unity of the ownership. If you want, I have explained this, it's on YouTube. Just put my name and put monotheism. I spoke about it in 30 episodes on television, 30 episodes. I speak about these dimensions if you want to know more about it. Okay? First generation, they didn't have time. They didn't even care about these things. Yeah, we know God. We destroy the idol, we put God. That's just basic things. Basic, 101. But the second generation, no. Because now we have different schools. We have people who negate the existence. How do you prove God is there? Tell me. So you need to prove. And in order for you to prove, you have to go deeper. What is the second issue beside monotheism? Atiyah. What is the second philosophical issue besides Tawheed, monotheism? Something equally important. It has to do with God. And it is one of the foundations of religion, faith, foundational.
Justice.
Exactly. Divine justice. Adl al-Ilahi. Shaheed Mutahari has a book. Have you read that book? It's important. It's called Al-Adl al-Ilahi. Divine justice.
So, would you say that they mainly started Usul al-Din?
Yeah? The discussion over Usul al-Din. Because with the first generation, it was a primitive, basic, primitive. But the more they developed, the more they mentally evolved, and the more they expanded, they went into Europe, into Africa, into Iran, into China. There are many religions there, many philosophical, so they had to debate with them. So this necessitated that they established these sciences existed, but nobody went after them. There was no need. Just destroy your idol and worship God. That's it. فَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ. Destroy, negate the idol, and worship God. But then later on, you have to explain how. I have things with God. You have to tell me. I have issues. I have things to know. Is God just? Is He unjust? Is He forcing me? Is He giving me freedom? These things, divine justice. Are we forced as a human beings? Am I forced to be Muslim? Am I forced to know God? I have no other choice? Or no, God says, listen, I teach you, but then I give you freedom of choice. This is a very important debate. Very sensitive debate. And it is an ongoing debate, even today. It has no end. It's still evolving. Qada and Qadr, divine destiny. What is Qada and Qadr? Even today, people, they don't understand it. They really do not understand the true meaning of it. When an accident happens, Now, someone gets killed. Does God know about this or he doesn't? If he knows about it, did he allow it to happen or he didn't? This guy was a good guy. Why he's sick? Why he gets cancer and dies at the age of 20? Why? Why he drowns, you know? He didn't do anything wrong. These things have to do with divine justice. So they discuss these things. They discuss it. In the first generation, they didn't pay attention, you know. It was basic for them. They could hardly learn how to pray, how to fast, because they were converts, you know. So they didn't even have time to go deeper into this. Except our imams. Imams were different. Imams were divinely inspired. They didn't go to school. But for regular people, they had, so the tabi'een, so the main highlight of their tafsir is to speak about these issues. These are philosophical, theological issues. They started to discuss them in their tafsir, and they depend on the verses of the book. Also, in the tafsir of the first generation, they did not speak about other nations, other nations. They did not speak about history. It was irrelevant for them. But in the second generation, they spoke also about they expanded on the history of other nations too in their tafsir. So when they speak about Ad, Thamud, Noah, Lut, Ibrahim, Musa, Isa, they speak about their message, their books, their communities, the details about their life. This is also another dimension. One more. The second highlight. What is the second highlight? So the first one is the expansion and the extension and the in-depth argument. What is the second? This is broken. What is the second? This is the second. The second characteristics of the exegesis, the tafsir, the explanation, was the formation and the inscription. The first generation, Imam Ali, after the death, the departure of the Prophet, he sat at home and he gathered the Quran from people in one book and he put it in one book. So he comes to this companion and he says, "What do you memorize?" He says, "I memorize such and such." So he takes it. And Imam Ali, he was the first memorizer. He knew everything. And he memorized that and he never forgot. Because the Prophet put his hand on his chest and he said, "Oh God, make him memorize my book." But still he would to double check. He will ask. So the book, after the Prophet's departure, was gathered in one piece. However, the explanation of the book was not put in one piece, in one book. So it was kept in the brains of the people and their hearts. Okay? It was not written. It was not inscribed. The second generation, when they came, they started the inscription of the tafsir. They will write it, put it in a book, gather it. Not just in his This guy is dead. If he dies, how can I have access to him after death? So I need to go and write it, put it in a book, put it on paper. And the formation, tashakkul. Formation means tashakkul al-Quran. And we put the tafsir also in order. Tashakkul means putting the tafsir chronological order and also diversify it, meaning that I say not just one opinion, I say 2, 3, 4 opinions in regard to this verse. So there would be more than, if you open the book of tafsir of the Quran, there is a verse and there are 3 or 4 or 5 opinions, not just one. So this is part of the expansion and the formation. And for instance, one of those, we will study him, one of those tabi'een, his name was Mujahid. Mujahid was the student of whom? I'll give you a tip. Was the student of the school of Mecca. Who was the leader of the student? School of Ibn Abbas. Ibn Abbas. He says, for my tafsir, for my book and my thesis, I double checked the entire Quran with my teacher 3 times. 3 times. Every ayah I go and double check it with him. Cross-examine it with him. Every ayah, 3 times I did the whole Quran to make sure that what I put is the opinion of my teacher Ibn Abbas. Because he's the authentic source. And then they say Ibn Abbas, when he checked this Mujahid, he checked the book with him 3 times. He said, now the most knowledgeable among this school is this man, Mujahid. Because he took every bit of the tafsir from me. But this process did not happen during the first generation. That a student goes to his teacher 3 times and tell him, let's go through the book. Didn't happen. There was another logistical reason that they did not do that. Why? The first generation. Logistical reason. What was it? Logistical. It has to do with logistics.
Availability of the Prophet?
No, the Prophet is gone. Someone else.
You mean Tabi'in?
No. Sahaba. They did not go into this expansion that took place during the second generation. Logistic reason.
They afraid of the tafsir if it comes to them, or something that might affect their politics or anything like that?
Politics was part of it, definitely. Politics was part of it.
They didn't want,
But logistic reason.
they didn't want to put the Quran in front of the other books?
No. This is, Omar said, do not scribe the hadith, so we don't want people to get confused between the Quran and the hadith. But this was not his real intention. His real intention, he did not want people to know about Ahlul Bayt, because there are huge collection of the hadith narrated by the Prophet about his family. Omar did not want people to know about this. But I am saying logistical reason.
There was not enough time.
Exactly, Hamid. Because there were so many wars happening during the first caliph, second caliph, third caliph, and fourth Imam Ali. People were always in their military geared, always. No break. Have you seen some American soldiers? He says, I've been to Afghanistan 3 tours. I've done, do you hear this? 3 tours to Afghanistan. Tours means trip. So they deployed him 3 times. Each time 2 years, 3 years. Same thing with Sahaba. Send them here and there and here. So where is the time to sit and study and discuss and relax? No time. So that was logistic. Whereas with this generation, they had enough soldiers to send. Some people go to the battlefield, people go to school to study. Besides, there were four schools. If you can't make it at that time was only Medina. The first generation, the only school available was Medina. But for this, there were 4 schools. Medina and where else?
Medina, Kufa.
Hmm?
Kufa, it's Mecca.
Mecca, and 4th one?
It's
Basra,
Basra.
exactly. So if you can't go here, you go there. 4 schools, 4 campuses. So it made the logistic easy for people to attend. Whereas in Medina, he has to leave his family, his tribe, his business, his sheep, his camels.
So war was the main
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was wondering when you were
Yeah.
saying that, why didn't they do this at first?
Yeah, because they had other priorities. When you are at war, expanding, how can you focus on, you can't. You have limited resources. While with this generation, Muslims were, mashallah, exploding. And there is no birth control, so imagine the rate of, So they will send some to the battlefield. When the Prophet used to go to the battle, this is in chapter 9, Surah At-Tawbah, every single male had to go. But then generations after that, 50 years after that, not every single male had to go because there were enough enlisted soldiers. But during the time of the Prophet, sometimes females had to carry the weapon because of limited resources. So now we have 2 characteristics of the second generation. And the third one, we have another third one, but I will leave it for Monday, inshallah. Because we need to elaborate on the third one. Takes time. And I have a teleconference call for 1 hour, from 9 sharp until 10. I have to be on the phone. So, inshallah, we will see you on Monday. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.